completed a fully operational pilot version in the Cherokee language. We used Cherokee-speaking relatives and friends of ours in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. The player controls the main character and must complete a series of tasks in the game, interacting with other characters in the game who speak only Cherokee.
The basic approach that we're applying is related to what's called task-based language instruction in the second language learning research. In other words, there's a lot of evidence that people can learn effectively if you give them a task that requires them to use the language. So in the video game context, it's much easier to do that, and we can simulate a whole range of tasks in a virtual world that's very hard to do in a classroom.
The game uses a sophisticated record-keeping system that keeps track of what you've learned and what you should work on. It uses numerous interactive exercises that continuously monitor progress and measure levels of proficiency, helping the students stay motivated. The courses also adjust themselves automatically to the students' rate of progress, letting them advance at their own rate. The RESTful concept has been third-party tested on more than 25,000 students learning Arabic, and it relies on proven methodologies. RESTful blends many pedagogic and technological innovations, including virtual reality, human-computer interaction, intelligent tutoring, speech recognition, and many others. The outcomes have been nothing short of amazing, creating conversational speakers at a level of novice high in just 1 week. Tribal language programs that we've spoken to have to invest 2,000 hours into a student to get them to a novice high level. And this game does it in as little as 40 hours.
From a methodology point of view, the big advantage of our system, and sort of the way it differs from a lot of other systems, is that it focuses on language and context in which it's used. Many of the systems in which they focus to teach language rely either on a lot of repetition or give very little opportunity to actually practice the language you learn. So if you're in a classroom, for example, what happens is you have very little chance to actually speak at all, and you even have very little chance to, very few occasions to hear things. In our system, the moment you get in, the moment you start using it, you're speaking already.
RESTful not only teaches language, but also cultural protocols based on character behavior. It's a virtual world inhabited by socially intelligent virtual humans whose behavior is altered based on your actions. Governments and Fortune 500 companies now use video games to teach their adult employees. It's an effective method simply because the users forget that they're playing the game.
The objective of these games is not to just simulate an actual town, but rather to cause a suspension of disbelief. You want the learner to get in and sort of forget the fact that it's a game.
RESTful is a revolutionary new way to teach a native language. It makes language learning fun because you are part of the game.
We're interested in feedback from the community. Please go to our contact page and contact us about the possibility of creating a version of RESTful in your language. Thanks for watching.
Any comments about that? Well, I had the opportunity to see this a couple years ago, and while the technology was really great, we talked about the checklist thing earlier. You can see the guy, he had braids, and then there was a casino, and there's a coyote in it, and it's supposed to be Cherokee, but there's a coyote in Cherokee. The coyote's not really in Cherokee stories, it's not really a very Cherokee type of animal, because in Cherokee culture, the rabbit is a trickster, and there's a coyote.
So I don't know anywhere Tahlequah was closed for a powwow, but
yeah. So again, even attempts so far to make our own games kind of fall into these stereotypes, and it'd be really great, we could make our own. Again, that'd be my goal. I wish I was a programmer, but I think together, and as a community, we have enough people with enough different talents that we could actually make our own type of video game if we wanted to.
Yeah, that's one of the things that if you want to Google Unity, there's a lot of ways to do that, even if you're not a programmer. For several years, doing any sort of video game work meant that you probably had to be a programmer and know, C object-oriented language. There's some things and tools like Unity that allow you to do it from a storytelling perspective and or just a file management perspective. So there are also a lot of sites to get free or free or open source humanoid characters that you can then play around with and develop and make your own. So there's a lot of ways to execute these things that were not available to us as a community or native community or native artists for a number of years, but are available now.
Which, I don't want to be hard on Fort Media at all. They're out there doing something, and I think they recently had a Kickstarter for a similar language immersion sort of base game. And I've got to give them kudos for being out there and working and trying. Obviously they're Indigenous people are full of complexities, and there are a lot of Cherokees at powwow, and so that was kind of a flip remark of me, but I definitely do recognize the effort and the time that has gone into the creation of those materials, and it is true they definitely do work with local native speakers on creating the Cherokee language app that they've done. And Zach and I mentioned to each other, wow, that sounds like Sheyahshe, in the Res World clip there, and it probably was. So while there may be a few stylistic things that I would have a quibble or two over, I think the intent of the product itself is pretty admirable.
Well, let's open it up to the audience. If you have any questions or comments or anything. Anyone?
On most of the programs that you were talking about, and also the Res World thing that they're working on, is it just free access or what goes on to that?
I'm not really sure about Res World. Like Candessa mentioned, they did a Kickstarter campaign. There's 3 days left on it. They're not going to meet their goal. They had a goal of $350,000. They have about $9,000 right now committed. But I believe it's going to be a package that you have to purchase. I could be wrong about that, but the same company has several apps for Android and iPhone that you can download. They're Cherokee language-based apps. They're free. Well, there's a free version, and if you want to upgrade to the premium, you can pay a couple dollars to get that version too.
I think the Cherokee language app is $9.99, but there definitely is a free version that you can download that's not, doesn't have the entire language package that the $9.99 app has. And it does have actual recordings that you can listen to, and so you can actually hear the language spoken by fluent speakers as well.
Any other questions out there?
Just to follow on real quick while you guys are thinking, and whether you're interested in full-on immersive 3D games or 2D animation or whatever, even Android and iOS apps, there are ways to execute these in a reachable manner. For instance, if you are familiar with how to create a simple web page, there are ways to take that knowledge and go and get the tools online even, right in front of you to create these apps that will display on your devices. So keep that in mind. Again, the wherewithal that if you want to do it, it can be done. Just figure out how to do it. So.
One last call for questions here. Well, let me get one.
I was going to say, I really enjoyed the panel, and one of the things I think that the folks will realize is the potential for learning. different way too in some communities. So there's a First Nation in Canada that worked with a mining company to develop a video game to teach the young ones and their families to the virtues of mining in their own territories, right? So it has all these different, I guess, cuts to it. So I think it just expresses the urgency of doing these things on our own terms and representing on our own terms.
I think there's a question here.
Okay. It's for family members that have children. Ideally, like, how would you want to see Native traits for your children? Like, what would you want them? What traits would you want to see in a video game or, you know, in media in general?
I think the better parent has to answer. Rocks to the paper. She touched upon it several times.
The better parent is the one that didn't let their child play Assassin's Creed.
I didn't say it was a bad thing. I said my son would take that and hurt people. That's all I said. Because he hurts people now. It's like a miniature version of me without beard, okay? And not that miniature either. So this is how big I was at 6. So as a parent, the same thing I want as a person, as a human. I want to see what she was talking about. I want to see humanity. I want to see the humanness of a character, whether it's a video game, a comic book, a novel, a thought balloon from somebody. I want to see how that character is complex and interesting and not been run through all the shortcuts and the jokes that we talked about tonight. You know, we have a long history of the things we talked about, of being only in history, of being the white man is better Indian than the Indians, you're an instant warrior or an instant shaman just because you're native, or if you're female, you only have a couple of different uses. Maybe one is eye candy. So these are things that I would like to see, something that goes beyond that. And unfortunately, when you do that, similar to these games that we've seen, and in what we call serious games or educational games, the level of fun and interactivity becomes questionable. The Reds World game is very interesting, especially if you're interested in whatever language du jour. If you're interested in Cherokee or whatever language they present. Again, it's a few years old, but at the time it came out, it was actually pretty cutting edge as far as graphics. So if you are interested in that, and you have an interest, this would have been very interesting at the time. But because there's that serious level of really trying to punch on some poignant points, you lose a little bit of that interactivity, you lose a little bit of fun sometimes. And that may or may not have been the case here. So really what I want to see is a celebration of the culture. That's a real celebration. It's not some dry, boring textbook of facts and figures, you know. That's really what I want to see is immersing us in something interesting.
Hear, hear. I definitely second that emotion. But not to quote other Motown songs, but as a parent, something that I don't want my children to grow up with the idea there's only one way to be Cherokee. There's not one way to do anything in this world, and I want them to know that, you know, if we choose to celebrate my daughter's graduation by going on a family trip to Six Flags, that is a Cherokee event because we're a Cherokee family doing it by George. But it's that kind of idea, the kind of idea that we as Cherokee people, we as indigenous people are allowed to be fully complex human beings making choices and decisions that, you know, obviously weren't available to our great-grandparents, weren't available to our great-great-grandparents, and that is still as valid and authentically Cherokee as their decisions were, because the only thing that separates us is time. That's what I want to see for my children. Recently, there was a video short on PBS that was part of a competition, and it was done by, I can't remember her name now, but the name of the video short is Hoverboard. And what it is, it's a young Navajo girl who is enamored with Back to the Future 2. And as a geek, I mean, that's like amazing, right? There's no explicit statement. This girl is a Navajo who likes Back to the Future 2. The way that it's communicated is, you know, she's obviously in the Southwest. She calls her bear Shush, which is the way, you know, the Navajo word for bear. And throughout this short, you know, her interest is in trying to watch Back to the Future 2, and she ends up building a time machine, and, you know, she sends her bear back in time, and he brings her back a hoverboard. And then, you know, it's a real hoverboard, and they, like, ride it around and stuff. But it's hugely inventive. It's very imaginative. It totally steps outside of all of these checklists that, you know, that we've been joking about for this entire time. And it does so in a really fresh way that says, you know, a young Navajo girl, and it's wonderful that it's a young Navajo girl, can have any interest whatsoever. And it was something that I found to be pretty amazing. There's a book, and it's by Paul Chatt Smith, and it's called Everything You Know About Indians Is Wrong. And it's a really interesting read. It's essentially a collection of talks that he's given over his career. But one of the things that he talks about in that book is sort of the invisibility of modern Indianness in a way. And this is something, you know, that we talk about within anthropology as well, sort of the idea that there are certain authentic ways to be Indian or to be indigenous, and anything outside of those is inauthentic or is non-Indian. And how that is, really it is false choice. He uses an example of Black Elk, which, you know, Black Elk Speaks is, you know, a huge book. Everybody reads it. It's sort of the...
written by Flaming Rainbow.
Yeah, it's sort of like the go-to text for, you know, Lakota medicine.
Sorry about that.
But, you know, later on in his life, he actually became Catholic, and he was writing catechisms for the Catholic Church. And that's not something that a lot of people talk about. And, you know, how do you reconcile Black Elk, you know, shining pantheon of, you know, Lakota medicine man, and the Roman Catholic catechist? Because he was both things in the duration of his life. So allowing, or not even allowing, but representing the humanity of indigenous peoples, I think, would be a victory. And I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I would definitely like to see the notion of what is indigenous, what is authentically indigenous, not sealed and locked in something that is tied to 50, 100, 150, 200 years ago, because that's no way to live.
I'll follow up one brief thing on that. One thing I'd like to see is just more good stories with Native people. I mean, what's the answer to that? I want to see less crap and more good stuff. You know, growing up, removed from city life, I grew up on a farm. I'm a simple farm boy, and I watched the thrilling days of yesteryear with Lone Ranger and Tonga. I mean, and I was cool with it. That's all I had, and I liked it. And I still am a big fan of it. But I know that that's not the best representation that we can have, but it's all I had, and I grabbed onto it. And so what I want is more good things for whether it's Native youth or any age to grab onto and say, that's Native, or that's me, or that's part of me, or I identify with it. Let's grab more good stuff.
Which, that reminded me, there's a guy who was at OU at the same time I was, and he's gone on to do many illustrious things. But his name is Bird Rainwater, and he was actually working with the Sundance Film Festival, and he may still be at this point in time. But somebody, I overheard him ask, I want to be a Native filmmaker, what kind of things can I do? And his answer was, we have enough setting the record straight. Tell some good stories. And I think that says a lot about what we need to do in terms of creating more of our own content. We need to tell our own stories. And I think that's something that is important to take away. And while, the video game Assassin's Creed 3, I think part of the reason we're so excited about it is because it gets so many things right. But ultimately, it is still someone else telling our story. And the only way to solve that is to tell our own.
And that's beyond culture. So, I mean, whomever you are, if it's your story, tell it. Whether it's a native story or... How many writers are there? People that consider themselves writers in here? So, thank you for being honest. I appreciate that. And any artists? Keep your hand up. Any people that consider themselves artists? Okay. And people that do any sort of video game or technical or animation type stuff? Just curious, I mean, we're all looking at ways to express ourselves in whatever the communication is. So if there's any interest, of course, in tonight's topic, which is video games, that's just another way to tell a story. So.
All right, I guess we'll wrap up here. I'd like to thank the panel for have we got any questions?
I was going to say, we all want historical accuracy and cultural accuracy in our video games and our movies, but then there are a lot of things that we want to protect that we don't necessarily want out into the world. Where do we, how do we decide where the line is for each of those, for that medium?
I think that you bring up a very, very interesting question. And I'm not sure if everyone heard that, but it was, within our respective cultures, we all have aspects that are sacred that we don't wish to be out in public for everyone to view or take part in. And Cherokee culture's definitely got its own particular aspects which have been held close and not shared widely. I think I don't think there is an easy answer to that question. Not in any means. I've heard elders argue about it. I've heard, two elders. I was part of an oral history project here at Cherokee Nation. And the project was young children from the immersion school. I think we had 5th and 6th graders who interviewed Cherokee-speaking elders, all in Cherokee, and the aspects that they were interviewed in, it was family stories, traditional foods, views of language, and then sort of basic biography. And in the family stories section, there was a question about, would you mind telling me a funny or a scary story? And we get a lot of really interesting responses to that. But the elders actually kind of debated over whether or not we should ask that question in that way. And the reason why was because, there are some stories that we don't share. There are a lot of stories that aren't recorded. We have entire genres of folklore that have not been recorded, which is saying a lot considering how deeply the Kilpatricks scoured Cherokee Nation looking for folklore, and not to mention James Mooney. So the fact that some of those things have not been captured but are still active storytelling genres says a lot. And in the course of this conversation, one elder says to another one, but if we don't write it down and it disappears, how will we ever know it was here? And I thought that was a wonderful thing to think through. How do we know it was here if we never document it, if we never record it? Of course, the debate raged on, and they eventually settled on letting the children ask the question And then the elder has the ability to choose, you know, do I want to tell a funny story? Do I want to tell a scary story? And a lot of elders said, oh, well, I'm thinking about this story right now. Or I told the story this morning. Or this story occurred to me while I was driving up here. And so they shared something that may not have been scary or funny. It was just a story. But I think it comes back to if we're the ones telling our stories, then we decide what's appropriate to share. When people come in, and I know that this was something that happened with the Kilpatricks when they came in and collected folklore. There's an oral narrative that talks about how they promised people they wouldn't tell some of the stories that were shared with them, and then they shared them in a book, and it is told by people today that some of the things that befell them was because they didn't keep their word. And you know, I don't know about the veracity of the stories, and I don't want to speak to that. But this notion of not sharing what you're not supposed to share is definitely very prevalent. And I think that if we start telling our own stories, that goes a long way in addressing that concern.
I think when it comes to language, that shouldn't be held back whatsoever in making a game, nor should legend stories or just showing a social side of a family group or something, or the whole community. But I don't think maybe part of the spirituality can be in there, but not the full thing, because it's not really an absolute for all outsiders kind of thing. And the number one thing that probably shouldn't be is medicine, because even though it could be very good, it can have an equal or greater bad side if used in the wrong hands. So there is a wide variety of what some people would say would be okay and not, but for me the main thing that would have to be there, it would be some kind of legends and stories and social settings, all in language.
I'll just follow on real briefly. I think that's a really interesting question. I don't know that I can answer it fully. I will say, as you ask that type of question, I'm just one person. And so I can always give you my opinion, and it doesn't represent everyone at the panel or even my community. So again, telling your own story in your own informed way, making sure it's your own story, but again, it's about the choice to tell that story, whether it's, do you have the right or not? I don't know. And that's a personal decision everyone has to make about their own stories. So that's all I would add to that. I think they've made excellent points. So.
Any more questions? Well, I guess we'll wrap up here then. I'd like to thank the panel for coming out and entertaining us. It was really interesting to hear everyone speak. I'd like to thank you guys for showing up too, because without the audience, we should sit here talking among ourselves. So, thank you for coming out. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming tonight. We encourage you to also attend the rest of the symposium this week. Tomorrow will be the opening ceremony at 9:30 in the morning, where we post the colors. And on behalf of all the 39 tribes in Oklahoma. Tomorrow evening will be our live action painting, video, and discussion, Age-Old Technology Meets Pop Culture by Funky Echohawk. It should be very interesting to come, so we encourage you to come back. Otherwise, please, when you exit through here, put your evaluation sheets down here and your pencils back in the basket, and thank you for coming.
Hey, it's still on. What are you doing?